And suddenly, you just know it's time to start something new and trust the magic of beginnings. With a cheerful heart, the Human Resource Development Cell welcomes everyone present here to Mind Doctor 9.0 with its much awaited segment, the Shri Red Bricks Summit. The bell has rung to this extraordinary voyage, a synergy of insightful sessions with highly acclaimed personalities of India. A Padma Vibhushan recipient, Maharaja Dr. Karan Singh, is an Indian politician, philanthropist, and poet. He belongs to the Jamwal Dogra dynasty. He was born heir apparent to the then ruler of the state of Jammu and Kashmir and served successively as Regent Sardari Riyasat and the governor of the state. His political life has had a head start at the age of 18 itself. In 1967, he became the youngest ever Union Cabinet Minister in the government of Indira Gandhi. At the age of 21, Dr. Karan Singh served as the first head of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Sir is India's representative on UNESCO's executive board. He has also been the chancellor of acclaimed central universities like Banaras Hindu University and Jawaharlal Nehru University. Authored several impactful and insightful books. His lectures on philosophy, culture, politics, and environment have had a worldwide imprint. With diverse portfolios of tourism and civil aviation, health and family planning, education, and culture up his sleeve, we are immensely honored to have him grace this platform with his presence. Before we start the session, we would like to request everyone to keep themselves muted in order to maintain the decorum of the session. You may begin, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me say at the outset, what a pleasure it is to interact with the students of the Shri College of Commerce, one of the finest institutions of its kind in Asia. I might tell you that I was briefly on your governing board, and my younger son, Ajat Shatru, graduated from your college in 1987. So we do have that contact, and I have, of course, been a product of Delhi University. I was connected with Guy Hall when I did my MA way back in 1967 and 68. No, sorry, 57 and 58. And my PhD in 1961 from Delhi University. So it's always a great pleasure to come back to the university and to one of its colleges, and to one of its finest colleges, and to interact with you. Today, I'm going to speak on the 4 pillars of learning. Let me say to begin with that we have in our culture very many useful definitions of knowledge. One of them is Ya Vidya Sa Vimuktaye. Knowledge is that liberates. It liberates us from ignorance, from superstition, from revanchism, from negativism, and leads us onto the unending possibilities of the human mind to develop in a positive manner. In 1993, the UNESCO set up the UNESCO Commission for Education in the 20th Century. It was a very interesting, there were 15 of us, all drawn from around the world in our personal capacities. And we traveled around the world, held very many meetings, and we came out with our report in 1966. And interestingly enough, the report is called Learning the Treasure Within. I think that's an important heading, because the treasure is really within us, essentially. However much we may learn from outside, ultimately it is within our own consciousness that we have to develop. So the whole report is called Learning the Treasure Within. It is a wide-ranging document covering the entire spectrum of education, its philosophy, its structure, its social commitment, its international perspectives, and of course students and teachers and and curricula and technology and so on. And although it was published 25 years ago, it is still, I think, very important and very relevant today. And in this commission, we really had two major points. The first point was lifelong learning. We made it clear that learning does not end when you leave college. Learning is a lifelong experience. And our education has got to prepare us for that lifelong experience. So I've been learning all my life. You'll be surprised to know I turned 90 in March. So you can see I've learned all my life and I continue to learn. This time when I'm speaking with you, I'm also going to learn from your questions and your attributes. So learning, first of all, is a lifelong exercise. That's an important point. And the second important point we made was we identified what we called the 4 pillars of learning. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today, rather briefly, because the report covers a lot. To quote the report, it talks of the 3 dimensions of education: ethical and the cultural, the scientific and the technological, the economic and the social. And between them, these cover the whole spectrum of human condition. So learning, 4 pillars of learning. The first pillar of learning is learning to know, the Jnana Yoga. Ano bhadra ketavo yantu vishvaraha. We say, let noble thoughts come to us from every side. Our civilization has always been a learning civilization. It's been a dialogic civilization. It's a civilization that has asked questions of its teachers. And therefore, this learning to know is tremendously important because the capacity to learn is significant. And the capacity to learn involves the capacity to ask questions. Always remember the Indic civilizations, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, are dialogic civilizations. What are the Upanishads? They are where the rishis realized rishis are sitting and questions are asked, very sharp questions. Why are we here? What is the purpose of our life? Who impels us to move and all? So this whole question and answer. Gita is a question and answer. The Buddha had question and answers throughout his whole life, 40 years when he was teaching. Mahavira did the same. So this question and answer format is something which is tremendously important. And learning to know, I think, is very important. Because now what is happening is, with the exponential explosion of knowledge, there is so much information that very often we get lost, swamped in the tsunami of information. So what we have to do is, from information, we've got to build knowledge. And from knowledge, we've got to distill wisdom. That is the real way of learning to know. From this huge ocean of information, what is the knowledge? And from the knowledge, where is the wisdom? Because knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Hitler also had a lot of knowledge, but look what he did. So unless you have wisdom, unless you have compassion, and if you have understanding, your knowledge is not going to be able to. So I think it's tremendously important that we have to learn and understand how it is that we are going to use this knowledge. But remember, life is not a meaningless journey from the womb to the tomb. Life is an exciting adventure of consciousness. And that consciousness revolves around our own awareness and our own knowledge. So this is the first pillar. We must learn how to know, must learn to learn, and the learning must continue with us throughout our lives. I may add something very interesting which you may know about. Have you heard of neuroplasticity? There is now new revelation in neuroscience that the neurons of the brain are not static. They can be influenced even after the child. Before you were born, we heard about Alimanyu and others who learned in the mother's womb. But now we are talking about neuroplasticity, in which positive vibes can be, as it were, shot into the brain. It's a very fascinating area. There's an institute in Delhi, which I chaired for many years, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education in Peace and Sustainable Development, MGIE. It's in Delhi. If you want to learn more about neuroplasticity, you can contact them. They even have talked about Gandhi neurons. In other words, can you have positive neurons? Can you develop games that give a positive feedback? So the whole point, therefore, learning to know revolves around the mind, around the brain, around the capacity to ask questions and the capacity to learn. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is learning to do, the karma yoga. You may learn a lot, but if you haven't learned anything to do anything, what is the use of that learning? That is the problem we are having in India today. Lakhs and lakhs of young boys and girls, there's an aimless drift into college. And after that, they graduate without any specific skills. And therefore, they hang around, they become unemployable. That is what I have also felt, that between college, school and college, we must have thousands of IITs. Not ITIs are very great. IITs, where you can give training to young people in some craft or the other. It doesn't matter what you're doing, provided you're doing it properly. I think the Gita says that very clearly, that whatever you do, you must do with a certain sense of commitment. I'll tell you a story. The Brihadeshwar temple, probably the greatest Shiva temple in India, in Tanjavur. Raja Chola, the builder, was the man a monarch who built it, went out to inspect the work. And there saw a man cutting stone. He said, "What are you doing?" First man, he said, "I'm cutting stone." He went a little further, he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm earning a living." He went a little further, the third person, "What are you doing?" He said, "Sir, I'm building a great temple." So they were doing the same thing, but the first one was just mechanically cutting. He had nothing, no higher concept. The second, that is tamasic. The second one was rajasic, at least he was earning something for his family. But the third one, while doing both of these things, realized that he was building a great temple. So I think what we have to realize now, we are building the great temple of New India. And therefore, when we build that temple, we must develop skills to build that temple. We cannot build that temple simply by sitting around and doing nothing. And therefore, it's important that we should learn to do something, whatever it is we may learn. There are many crafts, there's so much one can do. There's makeups and there's startups and all sorts of new things have come up. Lots of possibilities to learn to do something positive. And remember also, let me tell you, I don't want to preach, but I must tell you, in order to do, you've got to keep yourselves fit, physically fit. And if you keep yourselves fit, what have you got to do? You mustn't poison yourself either by tobacco. Smoking is an antisocial act. It not only poisons you, it poisons the people around you. You mustn't poison yourself with alcohol because it is a negative addiction and can create terrible problems for you later in life. You mustn't poison yourself by drugs because they are harmful, they are addictive, and they will lead you into terrible situations. And you mustn't poison yourself by unsafe sex because now you're all growing into adulthood. You must realize that unsafe sex can be a death snare. So I'm saying these things not just to preach with you, but just to point out that in order to do, you've got to keep yourself fit. Because what you do with your bodies now will decide what you will be when you get to my age. Okay? So when you girls are 90, remember that you heard me speaking to you about the 4 pillars of learning. So this aimless drift must stop, and both teachers and students have got to learn that update their capacities to teach useful things. And we need a positive value system. As I said, when you are acting, you must act in positive manner. So the first pillar is learning to know. With all this information, how do you develop your mind? Second is learning to do. What do you learn? You learn to use. I'm a pre-computer generation. Believe it or not, I've never used a computer. When we were growing up, there were no computers. People won't believe it today, but we were perfectly well educated without any computers, without any television, and without any internet. But however, these have become so important nowadays. So these are things that you can always learn, and you do something very useful. That's learning to know, learning to do. The third thing that we found in the commission was learning to live together. Now, this is a very important point, and I'd like to stress a little upon it. We live in a pluralistic society. In India, there are so many religions, there are so many cults, so many sects, there are so many castes, there are so many classes. So we are a multidimensional civilization. And therefore, we have always got to keep our capacity to work together. Sahana bhavatu, sahana bhunaktu, sahaviryam karvavahe, tejasvinavadhitamastu, mahavidvishavahe. It's all there. It's all there in the Upanishads. There's nothing new. We must work together. We must achieve together. We must strive together. Mahavidvishavahe. Let there be no hatred between us. Just said it. It's only we have to recreate, understand in the new context the gems in our cultural tradition and link it with today. We can't go back to some mythical golden age. Today, how can this help us today? And I think it's tremendously important that we learn to live together. Now, learning to live together involves a value system. And there I have identified 5 sets of values that I feel need to be inculcated in our educational system. Very briefly, because each one can be a lecture in itself, very briefly I'll go through. The first are family values. If the family is full of kitch and tension and quarrels all the time, the child will obviously not develop in a positive manner. The family values involve 2 axes, the parents and the children, and the husband and the wife. Now, parents in India, I tend to think that parents are too possessive in India. We think we can run our children's lives. You can't run children's lives. Khalil Gibran says your children may come through you, but they do not belong to you. Every child comes with its own karma, shall I say, or if you prefer, its own psychological, neurological posture. Each child is different. Therefore, we have to be more understanding. We have to give this, because when young people are growing up, they become very independent and they want to feel that they are trusted. Similarly, the children must also realize that they do owe a debt to the parents. The fact that they have grown up, that they've been sent to school or to college, the parents have done a lot for them. Therefore, they've got to continue to be polite to the parents. You know, you can't have young people being rude to parents. That's not on. But be polite to your parents, and parents have got to be more understanding. Now, the second axis is the man-woman relationship. And here I think we've got to break away from old-fashioned ideas of the woman walking 3 paces behind the man, or the ridiculous European tradition of the woman walking 3 paces in front. What is required is to walk side by side. In the adventure of life, the man and the woman are equal partners. They are Rangini, shall we? They're equal partners in the adventure of life. There is no domination any longer. There can be no domination any longer. There has to be equality. And now women have to have total equality. Whether it's in politics, I remember I worked for a woman for 10. The only person I've ever worked for in my life is a woman, if you please. Indira Gandhi. For 10 years, I was in her cabinet. So, you know, it's important that women should really come up in life. And so these are the family values. The man-woman relationship and the parent-child relationship. The second set of values are societal values: cleanliness, punctuality, teamwork, helpfulness. I mean, these are quite obvious, but they are not always understood. And I'm going to ask you, I don't want to, as it were, point out that you don't know something. How many of you are aware? I don't want to embarrass you. How many of you are aware that there is a section of fundamental duties in our Constitution? Everybody talks about fundamental rights. What about fundamental duties? Part 5A, 4A of the Constitution is a separate part called fundamental duties. And I know because I was on the drafting committee of these duties. The committee is headed by Sardar Karan Singh. I was on the drafting committee. And if you look at these 10 duties that have been laid down in our fundamental duties, you have a whole societal map before you. So I would urge that everybody should have, what I frankly feel is that these fundamental duties should be put up in every classroom. You put up all sorts of folders and posters and all. What about these? What about to say what you need? एक हाथ से तारी नहीं बजती बेटा, मांगते जाओ ये हमें ये चाहिए हमें ये, तुम क्या कर रहे हो? What are you doing? Are you fulfilling your duties, or are you just mango? So therefore, I think you have to have a balancing on this. So these are societal values. Then we come to interfaith values. We are a multi-faith nation. All the great religions here. There's 4 Indic religions: Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism. 5 religions from West Asia: Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the Baha'i faith. We have multiple religions. Some have come gently, some have come as iconoclasts, and we don't remember them with any good vibes. The ones who broke our temples, no. But there was another group. Don't forget the Sufis, the Muslim Sufis. They came with a message of love and harmony. The biggest Muslim pilgrimage center outside of Makkah and Medina itself is the Dargah of Gharib Nawaz Moinuddin Chishti in Ajmer. लाखों लोग जाते हैं बिला लिहाज मजहबों में, regardless of. So don't say they're all Muslims of all. ठीक है, those Gauris and Ghaznis and all, we hate them, but there are some. They've done a lot of positive things too. There's a lot of positive, the beautiful gardens in Kashmir laid out by the Mughals, for example. So we mustn't have stereotypes. We must understand that we have had this great history, and there is an important, very important verse in like Rig Veda. Again, I go back to our thing. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vidanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. So we realize that there are multiple paths to the divine. That is the basis of the interfaith movement. I've been involved in the interfaith movement for many years. It's a movement designed to bring together people of different faiths, not a Shastra art, not to prove the superiority or inferiority, but to just understand each other, understand the basics of each other. I think that is something which we should do. Our constitution prevents us from teaching religion, fair enough, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn the fundamentals of all the great religions. I have one book. If that book is put in the hands of every student, you will see on every subject, whether it is food, whether it is water, whether it is nature, so much in common between all the various. And therefore, we in India, we cannot afford to have exclusivity. Our religion, our religions, our approach to religion must be inclusive. And we mustn't allow narrow-minded thinking to narrow this great heritage that we have. Third, family values, societal values, interfaith values, then environmental values. As you know, the world is going through a great crisis because of climate change. Already the tipping point may have passed. But nonetheless, we have to do what we can. And unless young people are taught environmental values, how will they do what needs to be done? I was on at the birth of the environmental movement. 1982, the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment was held in Stockholm. I was on the Indian delegation. So I've seen this movement move from the periphery to the center of human consciousness. But even now, you had people like Trump, for example, who almost dished the whole thing. He crashed the Paris Agreement, which was built up through the board. Thank goodness Biden has at last come back. But that's not enough. Each one of us has got to do more. We've got to cut down on carbon emissions. And our young people must be taught the importance. Here again, should I go back to the Shastras? The Atharva Veda, the Bhumi Suktam, 72 verses in the Atharva Veda, hymn to the earth, represent the most comprehensive statement of environmental values in any scripture in the world. So why I keep going back is that all these values that I'm talking about are embedded in our culture, provided we are able to choose them, understand what is really great. And this whole environment, climate change is becoming a disaster. Whole island nations are going to disappear within a few years, and we are facing a calamitous situation, extreme weather conditions, and so on. So we've got to do whatever we can, even at this late stage, and young people have got to do that. The youth have been, because you are the ones who have most to lose. हमने तो कर दिया जो अपना करना था. You are the people who are going to live for the next 50, 60 years. Therefore, you need to be more involved in the environmental movement. And finally, the fifth set of values are global values. Or remember, all these 5 values are in that third pillar of learning to live together. I've talked of family values, I've talked of societal values, I've talked of environmental values, interfaith values, global values. In other words, you see, we are proud to be Indians, but we are also global citizens, don't forget. We've got to move from Bhavani Bharati to Bhavani Vasundhara, from Mother India to Mother Earth. In the final analysis, we are all part of the same ecosystem. So while we proudly have our own individual nationalities, at some point in time and in some dimension, these have to be finally outmoded by global values. So therefore, global values we must learn, we must see. Look at that photograph of planet Earth taken from outer space. You've seen that, the NASA photograph. That shows our Earth as it really is, a tiny speck of light and life against the unending vastnesses of outer space. So fragile, so beautiful. That is the mother that has nurtured us from the slime of the primeval ocean 2 billion years ago to where we are today. And we are despoiling it. We are destroying it. We're going to recreate a sense of the divinity of the earth, laid down so beautifully in our Upanishad. And we must once again revere the earth and understand that we are ultimately parts of a. There's so many enmities and all between nations. I said in my farewell speech in Raj Sabha, let me give you a share from Shakil Badayuni. हर चीज नहीं है मरकज पर, एक जर्रा इधर एक जर्रा उधर, नफरत से न देखो दुश्मन को, शायद वो मोहब्बत कर बैठे. So therefore, never write anybody off. You never know. He may fall in love with you, she may fall. So these are the sets of values that are required for the third pillar, which is learning to live together. The first pillar was learning to know. The third pillar was learning to do. Third was learning to live together with these various value systems. The fourth pillar now learning to be, आश्चर्य होगा, our report said learning to be. What does it mean? Within us, how can we raise our consciousness? Allama Iqbal says, खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रज़ा क्या. What a verse. Raise your consciousness to such a level that before taking any decision, God will ask you, what is your opinion? And that's a way of putting it. So this what is your way? What is developing the inner consciousness? We're going to move towards the inner light, the Noor-e Ruhani of the Sufis, the Bodhi Chitta of the Buddhists, the Ek Omkar of the Sikhs, the inner light, the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world of the Christians, and the light that the Upanishads speak of, Vedaham ekam purusham mahantam aditya varanam tamasa parasa. I have seen that great being shining like a sun beyond the dark. That light is within us. And learning to be means you go to look inwards also. Remember, your inner life is equally as important as your outer life. I know many people skim through their life just on the surface without once looking deep within. Within lies a treasure. What is the name of our report? Learning the treasure within. So in the final analysis, learning to be, learning that the light is within us, the power is within us, the capacity is within us. That is ultimately the role of education. So learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be represent an integrated philosophy, which I'm sure you will find very, very interesting when you think about it and discuss it. And I'm going to end with something which was your young people. No? And do you remember what Bernard Shaw said? He said, youth is a wonderful thing. What a pity it is wasted on the young. Meaning thereby, very often young people don't realize these are your years. These are your charmed years. You may be going through difficulties. I know you have problems. You have problems getting to college. You have problems paying your fees. You have all sorts of problems. But these are your years. These are your years when you will develop. These are the years when you can absorb whatever is. I know there's a lot of corruption in the world. There's so much nonsense going on. There's so much violence everywhere. So much corruption. I know young people get frustrated, but you cannot give up hope. You've got to cling to that inner light which is there. And that is what I would leave you with, that message. Cling to the light. May the force be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your idea of learning from within and learn to be, the significance of Upanishads in answering questions today, the difference between knowledge and wisdom were indeed the key takeaways. Realizing the true value of education, putting light on climate change, were indeed of great value to the student community. Sir, now we will be taking up some questions from the students of SRCC. First up, we have Shruti Garg. Yes, sir. Sayam, may go ahead.
Good morning, sir. The session was too insightful. Sir, my question is that you were also the Health Minister of India. And what are your views on the current situation of pandemic?
It's a disastrous situation. It's a calamity. Our health infrastructure is so weak because we have not been giving it any interest. We've not been spending more than 1.5% of our GDP on health, whereas we should spend a minimum of 4%. That is why our health sector has collapsed. Totally, I'm not blaming anybody, but over the years, every government has been to blame, and this time it has collapsed. However, our health frontline workers are battling, the doctors are battling, the nurses are battling, and we are trying to save something from the dead. But it is a calamitous situation. I've never come across such a situation in my entire life. But we have to face it nonetheless. We can't let it defeat us.
I hope that we have cleared Sayyam's queries. Yeah, next up we have Anshala.
Good morning, sir. So your session was really nice and insightful. My question is, how do you think that the decision to accede to the dominion of India through instrument of accession has shaped the development and progress in Jammu and Kashmir?
Now you can't get 2 lectures for the price of 1, beta. Today I am speaking about learning. If you want me to talk about Jammu and Kashmir, you'll have to invite me again. क्योंकि वो तो कहा, मैं एक ही बात कहूँ जो मैंने पार्लियामेंट में कही थी, किसी ने पूछा जम्मू कश्मीर का क्या है, मैंने कहा देखिए अजीब दास्तां है ये, कहाँ शुरू कहाँ खत्म, ये मंजिलें हैं कौन सी, न वो समझ सकेगा.
Sir, there are some questions in the chat box as well. So what is your reaction to the things which you think you missed due to having the political responsibility that you had at such a young age?
Well, I don't know. Of course, I was living in college hostels because I did my examinations without living in hostels. That I missed that college life as such. But otherwise, I don't think I've missed anything. I've been very, very fortunate. I've had every single experience that I can think of. My wife and I were married for 60 years. We passed away in the 60th year of our marriage. We traveled around the world for children, grandchildren. I've now become a great-grandfather, if you please, earlier this year. So I don't think I've missed very much. I've been very, very fortunate. I think the only thing I've really missed is college life.
Okay, sir. Is there anybody you'd like to mention who acted as a mentor and pillar of support in your life?
Definitely. There are 2 people I would like to mention. Jawaharlal Nehru was my idol, and he was my mentor. There's a volume, this sake of published by Oxford University Press, my correspondence with Jawaharlal Nehru. He was very, very fond of me. All his letters me are addressed. My pet name was Tiger, so my dear Tiger, every letter. And he was my mentor. I learned a great deal from him, and he supported me through very difficult times. The second person who was my mentor was Dr. Radhakrishnan. He was the one from whom I learned how to speak, from whom I learned the importance of our cultural background, from whom I learned how we should seamlessly use Sanskrit in an English speech. He was a great teacher, and he took me under his wing. So look at my good fortune. 2 mentors, 2 of the greatest people India has produced. Jawaharlal Nehru for politics, Dr. Radhakrishnan for academics.
Sir, I'd like to ask one more question. How do you think the constant conflicts between Pakistan and India due to the infiltration from Pakistan in territory of Kashmir have affected the youth of Jammu and Kashmir?
Well, the youth has been under great, again, as I said, this is a different matter, but youth obviously have been under great stress and strain because these infiltrators have come in, and the youth of Kashmir has been misled by a lot of Pakistani propaganda. Thousands and thousands have been killed. The crossfire between the terrorists and the security forces. Unnecessarily, they've been sacrificing their lives for unattainable and unrealistic goals. It's been a tragedy for the youth of Jammu and Kashmir. It has been a great tragedy, and they've suffered a great deal. Continue to suffer.
Yes, sir, that is unfortunate. There's one more question up.
No.
You being the chancellor of so many universities, be it JNK University, JNU, BHU, etc., what do you feel about the education system of India? What is the problem with the system? That is the ultimate question.
That is the final question. You're right. I wish we know. But let me tell you this. There's a new education policy now being published. I've read that recently. It is definitely an improvement on the present situation. It is, at least, oddly enough, it has incorporated several things from our UNESCO Commission report also. Because we fed in our inputs. And it is a great, but you see, at every level there are problems. There are problems at the primary level, there are problems at the secondary level, problems at the university level. postgraduate level. So there's not one problem. First of all, we've got to fund education much more than we do. We've got to fund education. Because you cannot have a great country with crores of children uneducated. You just cannot have it. It doesn't work there. So the universalization of primary education, we still have not achieved. Universalization of primary education. And then the modernization of secondary education. It should involve some skills and all. And finally, the rationalization of higher education. These are all need to be. And the teachers, don't forget the importance of teachers. They are so important, and teachers' training is important. Because with the change in information, the teachers also have to be updated, otherwise they will not know what to teach. So constantly upgradation of the teachers is very important in our education system. We have to open it up. We've got to open it up to the private sector also. We can't look upon the private sector as some kind of an enemy. It is not. It is making a contribution towards the whole universal structure in India. There are many things that can be done. And I suggest that you have a seminar on the new education policy.
Yes, sir. So there's one more interesting question. You were such a brilliant student that you made a university record. So why did you choose politics as a career?
Because I was in politics. I was in actual politics. Theoretical politics, I was in. So I was in real-time politics. So I said, let me study political science. That was the obvious thing I would like to study. And I did study hard, I must say. I had a lead over many others because, by the time I gave my examination, I had already been Sadr-e Riyasat for 5 years. It wasn't really fair competition, although I did have a university record, but nonetheless. However, I'm glad I did that. And I did my PhD, interestingly enough, on the political thought of Shri Aurobindo. So Shri Aurobindo, as you all know, was a great philosopher. But before he became a great philosopher, he was a freedom fighter. And he took a very active part in that Bhanga Bhanga, the partition of Bengal agitation in 1905, when Lord Curzon partitioned Bengal. There's a huge upsurge of nationalist feeling. Shri Aurobindo played a major role in that. And he got imprisoned and very dramatic developments. So I chose Shri Aurobindo's political thought. I was in philosophy, not in philosophy, I was in politics. I chose his political thought. That was my PhD. It has been published. The Maharaja wrote a short foreword to that also. It's published by Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. I think several universities study it for the MA. So I enjoyed my academic. I love academics. I love learning. अब भी लिख रहा हूँ. अब भी आपसे जो बात कर रहा हूँ, I find this a creative experience.
So you are indeed an inspiration. There's a last question. You gave up the palace and converted it into a museum. Why?
You see, I had a spare palace, let me say. The palace we were not using. And that was an old sort of, it's like an old fort, it's this thing. So I said, instead of just letting it vacant, or somebody wanted to make it a hotel, I have 25,000 books, that I bought in my lifetime. Kitabein meri wahan rahi. I have these priceless Dora Pahadi paintings, the Kangra paintings, Nal Damanti, wo wahan hai. All sorts of artifacts, the gold throne, which my father used to use for his darbar. So I said, let's make it into a museum. This has become the Amar Mahal Museum and Library in Jammu. Next time any of you go to Jammu, please visit that library.
Surely, sir, surely. Sir, it was so fortunate to have a man of such great stature interact with young minds and create an impact on them with his years of experience and wisdom. It was an honor to have you here. It was a pleasure to host you. I'm sure the student community must have truly benefited from your session. You indeed gave a unique perspective to the session, and we would love to have you again as well. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
all
you
of
so
you.
much.
And God bless. And remember, keep the light burning. And may the force be with you.
Thank you so much, sir.